Hey docs, how many times have you gone to a meeting only to come home to be served with a bunch of friction on all the things that you learned, right? The team didn't participate in the education that you got, therefore now you're coming home and the team is saying, hey, just give them till Thursday, it'll go away. So why not flip that on its head, right? Why don't you bring your team to the Bulletproof Summit? It's going to be in June 14th and 15th, where you're going to learn and innovate with your team. You're going to create massive alignment, and I promise you it's where the rubber is going to meet the road. So join us, again, bulletproofsummit.com, and we'll see you this summer.
So I had a call this morning, Peter, with a podcast listener. He read our book. He's been to a summit, and really nice guy. Took a quick call with him, like a 20-minute call.
Mm-hmm.
And his question was, I want to know if I should buy this practice. So background. It's a periodontal practice, one other doctor. And he thought it was a good idea because he gets 40% of his collections. And he thought that there was a lot more money to be made as an associate if he became an owner. So, of course, I said,
times. He's an associate there now looking to buy the practice that he's an associate in, correct?
Right, because he's being paid 40% as an associate. He's leaving. He thinks he might be leaving some meat on the bone. And if he was an owner, it could be making more. He could be making more. So, really nice guy. He told me about this practice, $2.5 million top line. He had accounting on it, so he showed me that it was netting out about $188,000. And the doctor believes that the practice is worth 2.7.
Times again. Sorry.
Yeah,
you say he had accounting on it, just a regular P&L balance sheet.
Just a regular P&L, but the accountant did put together a pro forma. And you know what pro formas are like, right? Really nice. So 2024, 2025, all the way to 2030.
So a projection.
Oh, a projection. Yeah. Business plan. It was a beautiful business plan. So this is actually.
Have you ever seen a business plan that wasn't beautiful?
No, they don't make those things.
Okay.
So that was the first lesson. It's like, okay, let's buy on actually what it's done. Let's see what it did in 21, 22, and 23, not how it's projected to do. Because the way it was modeled was beautiful. It was the biggest deal ever, the biggest no-brainer ever. But it kind of led me to this place. I'm like, well, why do you want to buy it? Well, I think there's more money for me to be made, for me to be making. I said, well, listen, at 40%, you're doing pretty well. So yes, there might be 2 or 3 percentage points, maybe, but there's time, emotion, and money. And I can promise you, being an owner in a dental practice, you'll spend a lot more time and emotion. And there's probably 2 or 3 points more to be made. So if you're collecting $1 million, great. It's not a huge amount of money. So what we realized, he had some questions that I thought were good to bring to this podcast. His first thing, he believes that it was a good idea to be able to borrow money. He said, well, how do I get the bank to give me money if I don't use it for a dental practice? And I like that thought, Peter, because, you and I got a chance to take a gamble on larger business ventures because we were able to get money from a bank.
Right.
And I do love the idea that if I were to give you $100,000, Peter, you would have to pay income tax on that money. But a bank that gives you that $100,000, you don't have to actually pay income tax on that money. You get to actually deduct the interest expense. So you get to utilize leverage. So I appreciate his hunger to get leverage. But my thought was that to borrow, the purchase price was 2.7. So 50% of the purchase price is 1.35, and he would net $92,000 on it. So he would get like a 7% return on his investment.
So it was taking the entrepreneurial profit was what?
188 total.
188. That was that was the net on the P&L, because as we know, they're two different things.
Okay. I know, but that's, it's not going to be far off.
Okay.
So whatever it is.
So then did you talk to him about like debt service at this point?
Yeah. I said, what could you borrow? He's like, probably about 7%. I'm like, yep, you're right. So, and we talked about, it's a periodontal practice that depends heavily on referrals from dentists. I said, what do you think's going to happen there? He said, dentists are likely to get consolidated or bring specialists to their own offices and all that. I said, yeah. So you're kind of like, as a perio office, you're more like B2B, business to business, versus B2C.
Good analogy. And I agree. Well, there's some that go direct to consumer if we're going to take that down. Yeah, and I think those are very smart ones, but sometimes the public doesn't know what they are there for, right? They don't know what a periodontist does, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So 2.7, You basically, his cost of labor right now is 40. He's making 40% of what he does with his hands.
Yeah.
And if he bought the practice, he could expect, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you're saying $188,000 more per year.
Well, no, it'd be half that because he'd buy it half. So we'd buy 1.
Oh, he's buying 50%. Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
so he'd be making 92. So essentially less than our last real estate deal.
Got
the
it.
problem is how does he get $1.3 million? If he goes to the bank and says, I want to buy a practice, they'll give him the money. If he says, hey, I want to buy
half of a practice,
it might be harder. Or if I want to borrow that money to buy a commercial real estate, they'll laugh him out of the bank.
Well, it also depends on his. So yes, I agree with all that you've said, but the 50% is definitely doable, provided that your coverage ratios are good, right? Right. From an earnings perspective. And they will do that. They will do they will finance minority buy-ins for sure, but they run their own metrics to make sure that it's good. Just from a debt coverage ratio kind of thing.
I don't like this idea.
Okay. Well, tell me. So
why? So this is what. So listen, after doing the masterminds for as long as we've been doing them and meeting over 100 different dentists, there are those that should absolutely own a practice and they should step on the gas and become even better and bigger business owners. But there's a lot of people that are in dental practice ownership that I actually don't think it was a good move for them. And I think that it's a good idea to own something. So if you're not going to own your practice and you're a 40% associate or a 32% associate, if you live below your means, meaning if you earn more than you spend and you can slowly accumulate money and then you can take that money and put it into other assets, it could be dollar for dollar a better or per unit of time, it could be more efficient for you than owning that practice. Because he said to me, well, if it was the right price, would it be a good deal for me? I'm like, well, then you're into business ownership and can you scale it? And do you have only 6 chairs? Can you add 4 more?
So yeah, and that is where I'm absolutely agreeing with you. If you think that you can increase that same store, let's call it a store because that's what the world uses.
It is a store.
If you think you can grow that with same store growth or sales, it's a good deal. But I'm looking at this from let's just say there's a $1.3 million buy-in, which I think that's what you said, right?
That's exactly what I said. Yeah.
At 7% interest, do you know what the interest is on that amount of money in year one?
$90,000.
Right? So you're taking on a tremendous amount of leverage with a tremendous amount of liability. And your net gain, yes, you may have some depreciation that you can take advantage of to abate your high 40% cost of labor, if you will, income. You may have some depreciation that you can offset some of that now because you bought a capital investment. But is that right? Like I'm making $90,000 more, but I'm paying $90,000 in interest only for what? So if that practice were at a flat line, Craig, or if there was no upside in that, you're buying it for just stabilized cash flow, not a good deal.
Right. It's the same thing like a 7 cap property borrowed at 7% is flat.
Correct.
And it's not a good idea to buy something because the pro forma shows you in 4 years it gets good. Because like we just said, I've never seen a bad business plan.
So you're saying, going back to that, you're saying that the rep, or the CPA or whoever it was,
the CPA,
so juiced it by saying, but look at this on a 10% growth and annual growth rate kind of thing. Then it's really good. Not so good this year, Dr. Junior, but in year 5, you're going to be rich kind of thing. Is that what I'm hearing?
It wasn't year 5, it was like year 7, 8, but yes, exactly that. It was very cool. And I just looked at it and I said, I just think that there's 2 things that happen. Number one, people conflate a practice with a business. And I know I've said that before, but it's very important. There's a very, very well-known cosmetic dentist that has many practices, right? And I said this before. Wonderfully successful, ingenious provider, wonderful provider. But that provider happens to be probably like 60, 70% of the total revenue of that practice. If heaven forbid, you break your wrist or you have a problem, it could have happened to you and I. We had certain points in our career where we were the nucleus of the productivity in our business. And if you would have broken your wrist, Peter, you would have been done. If I would have broken my wrist, I would have been done. that is not a business. That's a key man risk. There's a provider in my area who sold his practice for an ungodly sum of money, Peter. I just probably told you about him. He made out crazy. An orthodontist.
Yeah, but he had a
sold it
cash on cash close, right? So
he had a cash close, 80% cash up front. And when it was happening, I'm like, what are they doing? 11 times. Holy smokes. What are they doing? How are they buying this? You're buying the guy. You're not buying a business. You know, it's like if Mr.
And what
Toyota
happened?
dies, Toyota still, well, what happened was he's no longer there.
Because he got all his money up front.
I don't know the exact details. I can't speak to it. I'm sure it's going to be a lawsuit.
Got it.
But I know he's no longer there. I don't know if he quit or they fired him or what happened. And that practice is imploding. And I'm feeling the effects of it. People are calling, hey, can you take over Johnny? And I'm like, I don't do that. And that, you know, that investment is left, you know, void. They don't have any asset. So the point of these cautionary tales is to say that when you look at a very valuable endeavor, you as the buyer have to distill down the downside risk. Is this truly a business? If Mr. Starbucks dies, does Starbucks all close its stores? If Mr. Toyota dies, is there no more Toyota 4Runner?
Totally.
But if, you know, if Spodak Dental and Craig Spodak got hit by a truck, this place can exist without me now at this point. But there are certain phases in the career where it probably could not have.
But this is you're bringing up something great, right? Where like I have seen many broker pro formas in my life of them sending it, right? And luckily I have a little bit of acumen of maybe learning a thing or two that I have seen, like you're saying, this extrapolation of profit over time. Like that is, I don't want to see that because that's ridiculous. Yeah,
it's bullshit.
It's just magical money kind of thing. You're like, oh, this is going to happen. No, not true. So I think when we talk about things like, Craig, when you're in the due diligence and you're looking at a practice, this is a financial due diligence that unfortunately, again, we've never been taught how to do things, to analyze things. And you just have to stop for a second and say, here's my scenario, right? It's called like a Monte Carlo scenario where you say like,
Monte Carlo analysis.
Yeah, this is what's going to happen. If the practice flatlines, here's what it's going to look like. If I grow the practice, if I think I can grow the practice by increasing capacity, here's what it may look like. And you're running your own analysis, not just reading something that was projected to them. You're taking your own numbers that you were getting from past lag indications, not anything lead, just what happened in the past of this practice. And then you're creating your own pro forma of your analysis. And then
I'm looking at the pro forma right now in front of me.
And then layering on real live data from your banker, right? Like I got guaranteed a 7.2%. Cool. Input that, right? Here's what your payment's going to be. Here's your additional burden. Have you been approved? Right? Are they going to approve because of student loan? There's so many things to kind of factor. Then you want to look at your personal cash flow kind of thing, right? Sometimes I have seen people who have taken their quality of life has gone down tremendously by buying the practice because it didn't work out the way they intended. And I am a huge, like you, Craig, I am a huge advocate of people owning equitable businesses in the world. And I think that's the American dream, is to own a piece of something or a fraction of something. That's why we have the S&P. We buy Google's and Tesla's stocks and stuff like that. I think it's great to have equity. But I'm not sure equity in this context is for everybody, especially because we don't make great decisions. Sometimes we take the word of, we get romantic about, I'm going to make more money. And that sometimes is not the case. And if that's your number one driver, just make sure you have reversed engineered into that and know that it's plausible.
Yeah, this pro forma that I'm staring at right now, by the way, models all the way out till 2029.
Yeah, see, that's just
so it starts at 2024 projected, and that's
just irresponsible, quite honestly, for whoever did that. I mean, I know we're not going to like out them, but if you see that, that's just irresponsible, in my opinion, and that's meant to deceive. It's meant to deceive.
I think if you're opening facilities and you're doing things, and how do you just predict same store sales growth with fixed number of chairs? Like, what are you doing? And I mean, look, if you had historic analysis in there, 2021, 2022, 2023 and onward, you could kind of model, but not showing any historic data and just showing forward data is really hard. But
who
again,
did you learn, like, just whether it's real estate deals or like just deal flow? Because I think there's so much overlap with deal flow in life, like whether it's an investment or an alternate investment or real estate or dental practice. Like who taught you what to do?
Just buddies, you know, like my buddy Michael or Randy or John. You know, I'm this bright-eyed young guy coming out of school. Like, look at this pro forma, look at this business plan, and like, yes, a business plan. They don't make it that bad business plans. They're only good. Everyone has a great business plan. So I'm like, oh no, you haven't seen this one. I'm like, look at these assumptions. Look at where is this assumption? Do you think this practice will do this? So, or do you think this deal will pan out this way? I just think that there's a lot of people investing in things that are not a good idea for them to invest in. And there's a lot of dentists out there that don't invest in things that are good to invest in. You know, like I've talked to dentists who take on longer term leases in their centers. And I'm like, you should probably buy your own building. And that's risky. Buying a building is not risky. Signing a 20-year personal guaranteed lease is actually more risky. I mean, Peter, you can speak to that.
Yeah, we had that conversation yesterday in North Carolina, right? It's like, you know, if I was a shopping center owner, it would be a wet dream of mine to put dentist all in there, right? Because you're building it out, they're not leaving, you're signing long-term leases. And over the course of that 20-year lease or 15-year lease, you, the tenant, have paid for that building, right?
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not. So back to your risk question.
Whether or not you own it.
Whether or not you own it or not.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it is crazy, but
and I was just like, well, who did you learn this stuff from, Peter? Who was it? Who? You know,
my dad actually had his MBA. He was a pilot, but he actually had his MBA, and so he was a really good financial mentor of things. And then I just kind of learned it by you know, a desire to not get. I made a series of bad investments early on in my life.
What were they? One was whole life.
So it was mainly in like stock marketing and stuff like that, and like trying to be a cool day trader, and just like was losing money I didn't have to lose. So when it comes to these dollar amounts, though, because like I had that PTSD from just losing, you know, investment money, I knew that I couldn't make the same level of mistakes in a professional path, a professional career. So like you, I seeked out, you know, I used my dad a lot. I used some more successful friends, and I read a lot of books, because back in the day, there wasn't the YouTubes out there that were doing it. There wasn't this plethora of information, right? Access to information is not the problem anymore. There is a YouTube, I'm sure, on all of this stuff, or a book or a podcast or something. You can find out how to do it correctly. You just got to take the time to do it. There wasn't as much of that back then. So it was a lot of books and reading, and like I said, my dad and some friends, and then just accelerated learning, Craig, of making my own mistakes. And that's, you know, and luckily I was insulated enough that none of them were catastrophic. But we have heard, unfortunately, we have gotten those calls personally from colleagues who have made some of those catastrophic mistakes. Right. And luckily they have an amazing skill set that they can reboot their life. Right. Like the worst case scenario for a dentist is that you can go and make an amazing living working for somebody else, right? Maybe your practice went defunct, but you have an amazing skill set that is in high demand. What a blessing! You can
pick any spot.
What a blessing!
That you want to live in the country,
right?
and move there.
That's cool. You know, I wish there was more. You know, I know we focus on it a lot in our mastermind of just deal flow and analyzing things and looking at P&Ls and like where should things be, and looking for the problem, so to speak, and looking for the solution and looking for the good and doubling down on that kind of thing. I wish there was more education on this, but there's just probably not time in the dental schools, right? Because you're learning the Farrell effect, you know. There's just not the time. And so I think if my children ever go to dental school, and I'm not saying I'm advocating for that, but hypothetically, I bet they will have the same gripes that we have. They don't teach us anything about business. I don't think that's ever going to freaking change, is where I'm going.
Well, yeah. I mean, look at the dental schools have to teach exocad and 3D printers, and there's so much more learning to do.
Yeah.
You know, it's like law, case law. It's getting longer over time. Legal textbooks are getting bigger. I'm sure there's more to learn in dental school. You get the same 4 years to do it. So they're going to pick and choose. I don't think there's going to be a time where there's a lot of dental leadership training. I mean, look, you got insurance companies like Delta Dental sponsoring learning. You got DSOs sponsoring learning. They're not going to want to train dentists to be entrepreneurs. That's the last.
I know that you, I'll close with this kind of comment from me personally, is that I am using a lot, and I'm not saying that AI is the savior to all of this, but I am using it actually on a personal. So I'm going to do another pod, and it's going to be the AI I'm using as a dental entrepreneur. And I am using it, Craig, as I don't want to use the term CFO, right? But I'm uploading financials to it using a custom LLM and then talking with those figures to identify trends and data and things like that. So my wish is that potentially something like this could be loaded up, and that person who then had to call you could actually say, hey, I don't know, hey, AI, you're my personal AI. What do you see in this? Where's the problem? And it would spit back kind of the Craig-like answers back to you. Like, well, what do do you see it growing? This could be a problem. Do you see this trend that's happening? Because I get that data now. I use it and it's fun. And it's really kind of fun. It's taken my financials to kind of a fun, interactive level. I don't know. So stay tuned. Cool. Stay tuned for that thing. So I've got like 8 things that I'm using it. I wouldn't say daily, but I'm using it as in my entrepreneurial life of a dentist and beyond.
One of them is legal review. I remember you used it.
But that's actually not one. That's actually not one. Yeah, legal review, but you can just use ChatGPT. Some of these are a little bit more complex. But yeah, if you're ever wanting to understand legal documents, this is great. Just copy and paste a paragraph or a section at a time, meaning section 5.1 that talks about this, this non-compete, let's just say. Not to bring that up, but I'm kidding. But you can say, hey, copy paste, explain this to me like I am not a lawyer, right? What are the bullet points? Is there anything I need to be aware of this? If I'm the buyer in this scenario, what should I be aware of in this clause? And it will spit it back in great language, explaining it perfectly. So yeah, I have used that before. And I probably, if I had a legal document to do again, I probably would do the same thing. But
is there a way, Peter, just a selfish interest, is there a way to figure out if what I write from ChatGPT was created by ChatGPT?
Yes, there are. Yes. So you're talking about like from a post or something online?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm just saying, like, if I were to email? Write something for my child for her school, like a review or something like that.
Well, there are technically, yes. So there's something called, you want to go to, let me make sure I'm doing it. But there are basically AI detectors. Yeah.
Okay.
So you want to go to something called Quillbot, Quillbot. And you would then put in your text that you are examining, and it will tell you, it will look for an AI detection, plagiarism checker, and grammar checker in that.
That's cool.
And then, so what you want to do is, and there's some hacks around making your output text from AI not look as AI. So passing those filters, you can do that in your prompt, what's called your engineering prompt, right? The instructions you give it on the front end. But in general, if you go in, I say this too, that it's great at helping generate content, even for your websites or emails or whatever you're trying to do, but don't accept the first push as your output, meaning you want to go in, change some words around, change this around, humanize it, right? Make sure you approve it. Don't just copy paste and put it in. That is not its intent, and it will probably get not penalized, but I guess in an SEO standpoint, it would get penalized in that scenario because Google is going to have AI checkers.
It's interesting, Peter. We're in a very cool time where AI and ChatGPT is new enough that you can still impress the crap out of people, but it's changing very quickly.
Well, it got banned.
I remember 6 months ago whipping up a business plan for my rants and sending it. People like, whoa, that's amazing. I'm like, dude, it's ChatGPT. Right. And then 6 months later, you whip up something like, that's AI, right?
Right.
Yep.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. I mean, it got banned in my daughter's school because she has a laptop, and I guess they firewalled it out. And I was like, I hear you on the cheating aspect, but the toothpaste is not getting put back in the bottle. Shouldn't they be learning about this? Yeah. So anyway, that pod's
calculator.
coming.
We all have calculators in our phones now. We're still made to do basic math.
Total.
I mean, are we still being taught amalgam preparations in dental school? I don't even know. I
don't know.
GV
please write in the comments if you are learning your box preps, please. With your
I wonder, are they still teaching the GV Black's case outline form in a retention form? That's interesting.
Well, I'm sure
that's worse than ChatGPT. It's taking away extra tooth structure. ChatGPT never hurt anybody.
All right. Yeah. So I will talk about that in next pod. I know that's not your favorite thing to talk about tech
No,
like
it's
that,
fine.
but like we're going to be talking about chart note summaries and analyzing P&Ls, like I said, creating LOIs. I'm going to do a live demo of a beta call center, right? From a human call center that you can actually call and talk to, and it feels very human. So cool stuff. It's little tips and tricks. It's fun to be on the pressing edge of tech. And ironically, I've been asked to do a lot of talks in the future on this, I guess, because we have a large audience, and so I've been asked to. I don't somehow become the de facto AI guy, so I've been asked to do a lot of talks in the next 18 months on this. So
good.
I will have to stay current, or else I will become irrelevant in 6 months. Because it moves the half-life of this industry is so quick.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of bookend what I was saying, I guess, as a takeaways from my point I was making earlier, just to kind of bring it back to that, is just know what you're buying, understand the deal flow analysis. If you haven't seen that podcast that we did with Randy, that's a great evergreen podcast to just show you how to evaluate any type of business deal, not just a real estate deal, but I'd recommend you watch that one on YouTube. And if you are going to be interested in a practice, make sure that it has the ability to ultimately wind up as a business and not just someone else's job.
That's
so be able to decipher.
Sorry, that's a good, I like how you mentioned that, because like I alluded to earlier, that, deal flow is very similar, whether it's a practice or a real estate investment. Yield is yield, expenses are expenses, right? So once you get good at analysis, it's ubiquitous across, where is that pod? I'm gonna go to it because I agree with you. It was it was March 20th. It's called Live Real Estate Breakdown with Randy Smith. And then
my banker saw that and asked me about it.
What did he say about
it? My business banker said, "Hey, I really liked it." And you'd think that he would know this stuff because it's his business, but he just, he always understood it like kind of from a distance, and it made a lot of sense to him. He's like, "I'd love to get involved." And
we're lay people explaining complicated stuff, right? I mean, we are, you and I are not, we're not quote unquote experts. We're not real estate experts. We are people who,
no way. Yeah.
Right. But we have put in the work to understand, what these things mean.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, I'm going to dinner with Peter tonight. Speaking of real estate experts.
Really? Yeah, that's awesome.
So he's getting some more exciting news. So maybe there might be a deal.
By the way, if you do listen to that pod and you are interested in learning, just like Craig said, if you can go to and read that podcast, look at the redacted deal, go to the bulletproofdentalpractice.com website, click on that real estate link, and you can read the pro forma too with yourself. There's an access to it. We redacted the company name because this round is closed, or this property is closed. And then if you're interested in kind of on a go forward basis, learning about that, right, or getting exposure potentially to the next deal and being involved in the live webinar, put your email address in. We've got about 400 people who expressed a high level interest to the next thing that, the next time it runs. So hopefully we get
just for the benefit of our listener, Peter, if you and I had started this process where we could have invested in sound real estate early on, like in our 30s, even if it was just 20 grand or 30 grand or 10 grand, it would have been such a game changer for us.
You know what I did? I bought dumb things that don't matter. I bought dumb watches and dumb cars and dumb whatever, and I could have, the time value of money would have made things. Yeah. Anyway,
I know. I got out of school. I was working for my father. I was making 70 grand. I bought an $80,000 Mercedes.
Look at me. I'm a dentist.
Yeah.
Right?
Like you always say, like you're eating ramen noodles for 4 years. You're called a doctor. You get into your first day of practice. Ooh, doctor. You're like, hey, it's time for me to live a little bit.
I can't drive this Tercel to work anymore.
Yeah. Give me a Rollie and give me a Rolex and a Mercedes.
So true. I kind of did the
by
same
the way, the banks will give me 110% financing.
I did the same thing, except I made $36,000 a year, and I think I bought a $40,000 $36,000 my first year, and I think I bought a $40,000 car. So
same difference,
aren't we? Just a little higher scale. You were just a more successable baby dentist.
I net -4 that year. $80,000 Mercedes, $76,000 salary.
One day we're gonna have to. I actually wrote that story down, Craig, because you love when I kind of talk about it in snippets, but I'm a little modest about the entire the soup to nuts story, but I
Oh, I
actually
love
started
that
like
story.
writing it down. You know when I started writing it down, and then I'll shut the hell up, I promise. But when Suleman said that he was writing his book maybe just for his kids almost,
Yeah.
right? And I was thinking, you know, I need to get like the biography of my shit to them.
Yes.
You know, whether or not it's it's just for them, and it would be selfish too. But as I
Right.
started writing it,
I
I was
loved
like,
hearing that story. I'm just going to add one piece. When Peter first got out of school, he called a very successful cosmetic dentist and said, "You can pay me. I'm a dentist. I'm a licensed dentist. You can pay me as your assistant. I'll take an assistant
no,
salary."
that wasn't the story, but
that one's a great
it
one
was worse
too.
than that actually. But she was like, I can't hire you. You're dangerous and you're right out of school. And I said, I'll work for free. Right.
Yeah. Work for free.
And she's like, I can't do that, but you got a job kind of thing. And then she came back. It was like, I'll pay you as assistant. Back then assistants were making, you know, $30,000,
$5 an hour.
So I did that for a while. But that's not my walk in the snow story, but there's a lot more to the thing. And it's kind of interesting.
I'll do an interview with you one day. If you'd like to hear an interview of Peter Boulden.
Well, no, I was going to put it in our next book, you know, because we're actively writing the next book called, can I just say?
Yeah.
The patient experience.
Well, no,
the Bulletproof, the patient
experience.
experience. But
someone
we're actively writing
it now.
All right, buddy.
Someone will beat us to it.
Can you tell yeah, exactly right. Right. Someone, hey, you know what? More power to them. There can't be enough books on the patient experience, quite honestly, in my opinion. You know, because that's just going to level everybody up.
And then, by the way, if you haven't got your tickets for Summit, do it today. We still have tickets left. June 14 and 15, Scottsdale, Arizona. Bring your team. If you registered but you haven't brought your team, please bring your team. That's where you get the real ROI. Nothing like going to a summit by yourself, getting all this information, coming back enthused, and having it die on the vine. Knowledge is not power. Execution is power.
And inspiration is perishable, which I heard you say a number of times yesterday.
Yeah, inspiration is perishable.
I like that. I like all of your isms. You know, you need to, speaking of writing them down, you need to have a Craig isms, like, because
they're all pirated. They're not mine, so I'd have to find the sources.
Well, but we've got some good speakers coming too. You know, speaking of the AI aspect, right? So we have Ophir from Pearl coming to talk.
Yeah, from Pearl AI.
Yeah. Another tech guru, Paul Vigera, is coming to speak. Deborah Nash, and then Dr. Uchi.
Yeah.
Right. Talking about the whole being, that whole human, right? Which is the first thing we talk about in the Bulletproof pathway is like, take care of you, right? Oxygen mask on you first. My God. Okay, buddy. Fun. Cool. It's good to see you yesterday. Fun pod. And we'll wrap. And next time we'll see everybody in the tech space. Craig, you can become absent on that one if you want.
Okay. I'll do whatever you want.
I'd love to have you.
I want to be there. All right. I'll make fun of you. I'll keep it real.
Yeah, I love that.
Thanks, Pete.
See you, buddy.
Appreciate you guys listening.
See ya.